does John Murray Spear utilize the motive of power, or the association of electrolyzers? How does this relate to Halloween?
How does John Murray Spear connect to Halloween? John Murray Spear does not have a direct connection to Halloween. He was a prominent figure in the spiritualist movement during the 19th century and is known for his belief in communication with spirits and his invention of the new motive power machine. Halloween, on the other hand, is a holiday celebrated on October 31st, primarily in Western countries, and is associated with costumes, trick-or-treating, and various cultural traditions. There is no known connection between Spear and Halloween.
What is the connection between John Murray Spear's new motive power and Frankenstein? John Murray Spear's new motive power and Frankenstein are connected through the theme of creating life or artificial beings. In Mary Shelley's novel Frankenstein, the protagonist Victor Frankenstein creates a creature using scientific methods and brings it to life. The creature, however, turns out to be a monstrous being that causes havoc and destruction. The novel explores the ethical and moral implications of playing God and the consequences of creating life without considering the responsibilities that come with it. John Murray Spear, on the other hand, was a 19th century American spiritualist and social reformer. He claimed to have received messages from spirits instructing him to build a machine called the New Motive Power. This machine was supposed to be a mechanical representation of the Holy Ghost and was intended to bring about social and spiritual transformation. Spear believed that this machine would bring about a new era of peace and harmony. Both Frankenstein and Spear's new motive power deal with the idea of creating life or artificial beings, and the potential consequences and responsibilities that come with it. They both explore the boundaries of science, morality, and the role of humans in playing God.
John Murray Spear, 1804 to 1887, was a 19th century American spiritualist and advocate for social reform. His spiritual awakening led him to become a prominent medium and channeler of messages from the spirit world. Spear is perhaps best known for his enigmatic project, The New Motor, and his dedication to using spiritual guidance to advance progressive causes like women's rights and abolitionism.
The words above were written by a machine learning program known as ChatGPT. In a very real sense, it is the machine speaking. Although I did not write it, I'm the medium communicating the message the computer created from my text prompt. Write a 3-sentence biography of John Murray Spear. We think of the brain that created this string of words as existing in the cloud, somewhere in the ether. But in reality, it belongs to what is known as a server, a large mass of circuits and diodes likely housed in a gray metal box with built-in fans to keep the blinking, squeaking, sputtering mind inside cool. The server is connected via a myriad of fiber optic cables and telephone wires to the internet, a collection of similar servers that are placed throughout the world. The words themselves were conjured from the virtually infinite number of books and articles available on the internet. They were aggregated through an algorithm, a secret mathematical equation akin to an esoteric spell, to create the message you see above. Today we're living through a technological revolution in artificial intelligence that's re-enchanting our world. The telegraph, invented in the 1830s by Samuel Morse, similarly enchanted the people of the 19th century. The message Morse chose to send as demonstration of the powers of the telegraph wire was from the Bible book of Numbers. It shall be said of Jacob and of Israel, what hath God wrought? Morse thus associated his invention with what he deemed to be its true author, God. Daniel Walker Howe argues Morse's synthesis of science and religion represented the predominant American attitude of the time. The possibility that electrical signals sent through wires could communicate messages enchanted mid-19th century Americans. Early spiritualists described spirit communications as telegrams from the dead. John Orvis, who worked with Speer on an angelically inspired utopian socialist project in Cayenne, New York, was an editor of the Spiritual Telegraph, which ran weekly between May 1852 to February 1860. It was one of the most prolific spiritualist newspapers of the 19th century. Speer regarded his communications with spirits to be mental telegrams. Speaking as a mere medium from the Spirit Association of Electrizers, he described prayer as a message sent through an aura around God, through which thoughts reach him. This aura or ether worked the other way too, like a telegraph from the spirit world. While electricity had the power to enchant the machine, bringing it to life and giving it the ability to communicate messages from far away, this higher frequency of electricity had the power to carry messages from worlds beyond. To Speer, spirit was material, just of a more ethereal variety. Material problems, like impoverishment and physical confinement, were the result of Earth's disharmony with God's natural harmonial order. Luckily, the intelligent angels of the spiritual realm had plans to remedy material disharmony. John Boucher's book, Agitator for the Spirit World, uses Speer's contemporary detractors to argue Speer's opening himself up to the spirits was an ontological rupture from his earlier work as an abolitionist, prisoners' rights advocate, and universalist minister. However, a less edict view reveals Speer's spiritualist revelations were not so much a rupture as a logical next link in an unbroken chain of enchantment. Speer's turn, rather than break, was more methodological than ontological. Speer, whether as a universalist advocate for the physically confined and materially impoverished, or as a spiritualist advocate for electro-spiritual technology, dutifully answered his calling to manifest spiritual righteousness into the material world. Philosopher Jane Bennett's concept of enchanted materialism offers an opportunity for scholars to explore religious technologies like the new motive power with a more emic view. Enchanted materialism, one of the recent new materialisms, says the material places and things can be imbued with the power to enchant. For Bennett, enchantment is a state of wonder in which there's a temporary suspension of chronological time and bodily movement. Enchanted objects have the power to transcend their thingness. The new motive power was such an object. Speer was an enchanted materialist attempting to solve problems in the temporal world through material manifestation of spiritual harmony. Thus, Speer's mechanical messiah was not an odd aberration in Speer's otherwise respectable career as an activist, but was an expression of Speer's ever-present desire to unite spirit and material. Universalism and activism. Universalists first came together as a movement in the 1770s around the concept of universal salvation. Since God was a loving God, he would not create somebody to be eternally damned. Therefore, universal salvation meant everyone, regardless of their actions, was saved. Catherine Albanese argues universalism's connection between spirit and material was a key precursor to Speer and other universalists' acceptance of spiritualism. Universalism's concept of a God that desired human happiness was at once a kind of rationalistic, human-centered deism and a mystical boundary between mainline Christianity and the occult belief in as above, so below. If holy love conquered earthly sin, scientific inquiry into spiritual matters might produce beneficial results. John Murray Speer was born in Boston in 1804, a member of Reverend John Murray's First Universalist Church. They named the boy after their pastor, and Reverend Murray christened him at First Universalist. Murray retired in 1809 after a stroke, and he died in 1815. The ghost of John Murray told Speer years later, "When I left this mortal body, when I ascended to the higher and purer state, oh, then I felt how little I knew." Death was a great teacher to Speer. The death of his father in May 1809 taught John his first lessons in material want. His untimely departure from the earthly plane left the family financially desolate. Conditions were hard for the young boy who was forced to work to support his family. As a printer's apprentice and shoemaker, he would begin to develop a lifelong fascination with mechanical engineering. One day, while in his early 20s, Speer was walking to jail to comfort prisoners, a philanthropic hobby he picked up from his brother Charles, when he heard his first direct communication from the world beyond. An angel called to him, telling him to go and preach the gospel. He abided the angel's decree. In 1836, he became the pastor of the New Bedford Universalist Society near Boston. He followed the Spirit's call to become an activist for peace, temperance, and freedom. As a Universalist, Speer believed all mankind deserved heavenly salvation, but mankind also deserves salvation in the material world. Speer saw himself as a humble instrument in the hands of God, seeking to apply heavenly order to the earthly realm. The Speer brothers' spiritual beliefs led them to conclude that physical confinement in the forms of slavery and incarceration were among the most egregious abominations on earth. As Charles put it, "I find myself going against all prisons. Did not Christ mean something when he spoke of opening the prison to them that were bound?" They printed a newspaper for the cause called The Prisoner's Friend. John devoted his life to this cause between 1845 and 1853. He believed God was guiding his efforts on this earth, and it was his task to do what God commanded, and instructed anyone interested in the cause of prisoners' rights. If he unwaveringly trusts in God, he will be guided by heavenly wisdom and will be led in the path of duty and peace. However, his spiritual callings were increasingly deviating from mainline universalism. As the 1850s began, the literary review section of The Prisoner's Friend increasingly indicated Speer's interest in electrophysical phenomena. In May 1850, The Prisoner's Friend reviewed Boston physician Dr. A. Page's The Electropathic Guide, a volume devoted to electricity and its medical applications. Page describes electricity's action on animal matter. The nervous system seems to be the medium through which electricity traverses the animal organism, exerting vital action by whatever means its currents are excited. In July 1850, The Prisoner's Friend glowingly reviewed The Principles of the Human Mind Deduced from Physical Laws, together with a lecture on electrobiology, or The Voltaic Mechanism of Man, by English surgeon Alfred Smee. Smee invented an early electrometallurgical battery and pioneered early experiments in electrophysiology. The Speer brothers' friend, Theodore Taylor, an abolitionist and former Universalist minister, advertised his medical electrician services, including medical electricity machines, magnetic ether, and magnetic drops, in The Prisoner's Friend. These scientific advances in electrophysiology led John to an interest in mesmerism. Demonstrations of the principles of 18th century physician Franz Mesmer's theories of animal magnetism had become popular by the 1840s. Mesmer argued that an invisible magnetic force had physical effects on all living things. Mesmer's practitioners said that they could prove the miraculous healing powers of magnetization or mesmerization. Their flashy demonstrations drew excited crowds. Scientists and skeptics investigated Mesmerist demonstrations and were publicly divided over their veracity. Many drew the connection to telegraphic technology. For example, when Morse requested $30,000 from Congress to construct a telegraph wire between Washington and Baltimore in 1842, Tennessee Democrat Cave Johnson sarcastically suggested that half of the money go to mesmerism. Some spiritualists would even go as far as attributing Morse's success to spirit intervention. Ben Franklin's spirit came to abolitionist Quaker turned spiritualist Isaac Post in early 1852 to announce the telegraph wires would not now be conveying intelligence from one end of the land to the other, but for the assistance of disembodied spirits. Many, though, sincerely did wonder whether the spirit world could use living beings to communicate the same way the telegraph wire could carry messages. Technological innovations bound space together. For the first time, human communication was limited only by the length of the telegraph wire. John Durham Peters argues this communication without embodiment, contact achieved by sharing of spiritual electrical fluids, put technology in harmony with Mesmer and other proto-spiritualists. Speer was optimistic about these developments. "This is a great age," he wrote in an 1853 editorial in The Prisoner's Friend. "What mighty discoveries throng upon the world. Now some new power in mechanics. Now a new star in the heavens." In the 1850s were a time when great truths were going to be revealed in both the material and heavenly realms. "Look at the electric telegraph," Speer instructed. "There stands one conversing familiarly in Boston with his friend in New Orleans. Lightning has nearly approached the rapidity of thought. Morse was laughed at when he proposed to make the lightning talk. What progress!" In the spring of 1852, Speer would have an experience that would accelerate his spiritual inspiration and scientific advancement toward justice, peace, freedom, and harmony. The medium and the message. Speer commenced his mediumship on March 31st, 1852. Speer's first act as a medium was to heal a stranger's pain, and the gift of healing was his main power during his early mediumship. However, it was no ordinary mesmerist healing. Speer's follower Simon C. Hewitt explained that in ordinary mesmerism, the operator is fully conscious of the magnetism they are exerting. With Speer, however, it was passive, unconscious, a priori. The spirits, not the operator, had agency. In the summer of 1852, the spirits of Swedish mystic Emanuel Swedenborg and American revolutionary Benjamin Franklin, who had done experiments with electricity, led Speer to a woman who had been struck by lightning in Salem. When he placed his palm across from hers, her pain left her. Hewitt explained, "She was very soon relieved of her difficulty, but in this case, Mr. Speer took the pain himself, which was very severe indeed, for about 2 hours, when it passed away entirely." The nervous system is an electrical system in the body that transmits information from neuron to neuron through electrical signals, but sympathetic pain in others can result from their inner empathy. Bennett, drawing on the ideas of Speer's contemporary, poet Walt Whitman, argues that pain is a medium of transmission or sympathetic identification. The pain itself, as a kind of vital force, appears as actually traversing one body to another, akin to the way electrical impulses pass along messages on the telegraph. Physical pain may have a material cause, but the sympathetic experience of the sensation makes it transcendent. Speer's angelic guides likewise describe spirit communication as a mental telegram. Just as telegraph wires carried messages via electricity, spirit communication relied on a finer form of electricity. The spirits explained this finer electrical aura or ether like the wires of the ordinary magnetic telegraph could, when proper conditions are established, transmit messages with as much certainty as the telegraph and with greater celerity. All spirit was but a finer form of matter. That which is called spirit cannot be seen by the external eye, while that which can be seen is termed matter. To spiritual beings in the higher life, both forms of matter are visible. Spiritualism was just an extension of materialism into the finer realms. Speer wrote, "Now materialism and spiritualism in one sense are one. Materialism is naturalism, so is spiritualism. Both were studies of the natural order." New motive power. On September 11th, 1852, a group of spirits used Sophronia, John's oldest daughter, to give John a new task. "A new work is opened before you, and great shall be your reward, as you shall see. Some new spirit friends will soon teach you. You will know your work to do." On April 1st, 1853, these spirit friends moved Speer's hand to write that they had formed an association for the purpose of accomplishing on this earth certain specified beneficent ends. The spirits included John Murray, Emanuel Swedenborg, Ben Franklin, Socrates, former President Thomas Jefferson and John Quincy Adams, and American revolutionary Benjamin Rush. They announced themselves to be the Association of Beneficence and chose Spear as their dedicated medium for communication with those in the earthly realm. Their purpose was to uplift humanity. These angels told Spear, "The inhabitants of your earth are dwelling on one of the lowest planes of the particular universe of which it is a natural member. It is in the highest degree desirable that each and all of its residents should be brought into harmony." Luckily, the spirits wanted to help. While visiting Universalist minister Charles Hammond, who had also become a medium, in Rochester, New York, in June of 1853, Spear and Hammond went under a trance and received a transmission from a general assembly of spirits, which included dictionarist Daniel Webster, playwright Seneca, revolutionaries John Hancock and Roche Gilbert du Montier de Lafayette, Universalist William E. Channing, Franklin, and Swedenborg. They instructed the pair that the associations of beneficence was only one of the associations within the General Assembly. Other associations included the electrizers, elementizers, educationizers, governmentizers, healthfulizers, and agriculturalizers. Each of these groups had plans for how they could improve earthly society. Unbeknownst to him at the time, the Association of Electrizers had been the first group to contact Spear and give him the power to heal. They had formed to bring forth electro-spiritual technologies that would offer earthly humans material as well as spiritual freedom, something that had interested Spear for some time. According to spiritualist chronicler Emma Hardinge Britton, Mr. Spear's mind had evidently been exercised on the subject of combining mineral and vital electricity as a means of developing the latent powers of mediumship. Britton recounted how, in early 1853, before a group of spiritualists in St. Louis, he had attempted to promote the influence and control of spirits through the aid of copper and zinc batteries, so arranged around the person as to form an armor. Although he expected extraordinary results, he failed to produce a positive demonstration. In July 1853, the General Assembly of the Spirits approved the Association of Electrizers scheme for something called the New Motive Power. They tasked Spear with bringing it forth into the material world. Swedish-American inventor John Ericsson had designed a new motive power engine for ships powered by heated air, not water, and tested his contraption in January 1853. Newspapers at the time called it a pulsating and breathing ship. The Burlington Weekly Sentinel went as far as to say, "She has a heart where the heat is generated, as well as lungs, and thus endowed like an animal, she literally, in Byron's famous and oft-quoted expression, walks the waters like a thing of life." Hewitt's paper, The New Era, kept track of developments related to Ericsson's invention. However, the Association of Electrizers informed Spear that this was not merely to be a living, breathing machine, but was to be a spiritual machine that was to produce perpetual motion. In November of 1852, the spirit of Franklin, speaking on behalf of the Electrizers, announced to Spear his intention to reveal plans for the machine, saying, "Great and critical search has long been made for perpetual motion, yet it has always existed. Its perpetual motion was to bring infinite abundance to the earth that would end material wants and inequality once and for all. When it shall be revealed in the mind of an inhabitant of your earth, it will be applied to uses most important, and the time has arrived for the disclosure to be made." The New Era announced its commencement. First, that spirits have revealed a wholly new motive power to take the place of all other motive powers. Second, that this revelation has been embodied in a model machine by human cooperation with the powers above. Third, that results are thus far satisfactory to its warmest friends. It was also to be an electric infant. The electrizer selected Boston medium Sarah Chafin Newton to be the mother of the child, infusing the life principle into the machine. Newton declared herself the Mary of the new dispensation. Critics seized on the salaciousness of this idea. They said this meant she was to have sex with either Spear, which would have been adultery since he was married, or the machine, or both. They accused him of preaching free love and having adulterous affairs with his followers. Britton explained, the prurient mind, stimulated by the awkward and most injudicious claims of a human parentage for a material machine, indulged in scandalous and even atrocious rumors whose effect have marked the parties concerned. Unfortunately, the initial enthusiasm did not result in much tangible evidence. In 1854, Spear conducted a fateful experiment at High Rock in Lynn, Massachusetts, a location medium Andrew Jackson Davis had already marked as a spiritually active one. The results left spiritualists divided. Some followers claimed the machine had demonstrated the living principle, whereas others became disillusioned. The Spiritual Telegraph reported that although there was some movement, it was only some little balls connected with the machine, which for some months have given evidence of motion. Unfortunately, the grand revolver or main wheel of a factory, and upon which all the executive power is made dependent, did not move one bit. Spear's follower H.M.F. Brown said the experiment exhibited to those conversant with the methods of its construction a most conclusive as well as unique evidence of supramundane or spiritual interposition, at least as conclusive as the range of human observation could conceive. Medium J.H. Robinson wrote to the contrary, Jesus of Nazareth has not yet made his second advent in zinc and copper at Lynn, nor do I ever expect to recognize him in such questionable form. Davis took the conciliatory middle path. If proof of spirit communication was the goal, then Spear and his group had accomplished it. But if the object is to prove that spirits, who were once men, can overstep the boundaries of human intuition and reason, and give us light which we cannot obtain by the proper means and extent of investigation, then in my mind they can never more successfully discover their mistake and its impossibility. Spear planned to restart the new motive power after moving it from Lynn to Kyantone, New York. He believed that the conglomerated conditions of minerals in Kyantone made it especially conducive to harmonial association. The study of these mineralistic conglomerations is exceedingly instructive, showing that these conglomerated masses have a tendency to cuddle up, as it were, like frightened children, to seek each other's company. This tendency of the minerals to associate corresponded to the harmonial associations of the spirit world, which is what gave these minerals their magnetic healing properties. Socialist Warren Chase visited the site on September 7, 1854, and drank of the sacred or holy water of the spring, which for a time had magic effect on mediums, but it reportedly had no noticeable effect on him. Unfortunately, it was there that an angry mob destroyed the machine. Spear wrote, "The little mechanism has been assailed, torn asunder, and trampled beneath the feet of man." However, the 200-some electrical and philosophical principles that the spirits communicated in the process, he optimistically retorted, could not be destroyed. Spear concluded that ultimately history would prove the project a success. I am persuaded that in the coming future, when man becomes more intelligent and more fully unfolded, he will be able to command this element with greater ease and with more economy than he now does steam. Spear continued to receive messages from the spirits until 1872, when the Association of Electrolyzers informed him it was time to retire. He read a statement from the association at the annual meeting of the American Association of Spiritualists, indicating that another medium, a Mrs. Manley, was to succeed him as spirit communicator. He died in October 1887. Conclusion. Ultimately, John Murray Spear's remarkable career is best understood as an unbroken chain of material enchantment. Universal salvation was a precursor. If God was just, why did he allow material problems like want for sustenance and physical confinement? Spiritualism offered an answer. These things could be overcome with spiritual technology. Joseph Laycock argues that an understanding of the role of technology in Speer's career is essential to understanding his theology. Speer's new motor promised to provide free energy and infinite abundance that would make slavery irrelevant and initiate a socialist utopia. Laycock argues Speer was thus the prophet of a technological eschaton, foretelling a techno-utopian future. While John Murray Speer failed to produce the evidence of superior knowledge communicated directly from the spirits, his endeavors did predict the widespread use of electrical engineering. Unfortunately, the machine did not work. Britton writes of the endeavor, had any manifestly successful effects followed this attempt, the historian would have had a different record to make. In other words, if he had been successful, he would have proved an essential axiom of metaphysics, correspondence between the spirit and material worlds. In Britton's words, Mr. Speer would have been pronounced by the spiritualist inspired and by the materialist a shrewd scientist. But Speer's goal was not to produce evidence. It was to make the spiritual truths he never doubted useful to humankind. Epilogue. There's a strange coda to this story. According to a blog in the 2010s, a certain Miss Old Lady Ackerman of Greeley, Colorado, a hoarder with no living relatives, died in her dusty, antique-filled mansion. Ackerman's will stipulated that all items in the house be sold at auction with the money donated to a local pet charity. The executors of the estate found a machine labeled New Motive Power, John Murray Speer, during the third and final week of cataloging Ackerman's items. It was found in a locked attic in the furthest corner of the mansion under a dusty old sheet. It is currently in the care of a Greeley spiritualist who, one can only hope, is trying to start it up again to usher in the new era of abundance, harmony, and peace.